Hi, this is Jeff Spencer, your Math 120 instructor for the Community College of Denver, and this is our video lecture over section 8.3, which covers simple interest. So we're going to start looking, we're entering the finance unit, and that's really the rest of chapter 8. And in chapter 8, the rest of chapter 8, we're going to be looking at different ways that you can invest or different ways that interest is calculated, loan payments, things like that. But we're going to start with the most basic. It's called simple interest. So simple interest is a direct application of percentages because interest rates are given for certain investments, and then you convert those rates to percents and then figure out the percents of your investment or loan. So interest is the dollar amount that was, so just not simple interest, but just general interest is the dollar amount that we get paid for lending money or pay for borrowing money. So interest can be something that we get for investing money. We get interest on top of our investment, or sometimes we have to pay it for borrowing money. Like when you take out a loan, you have to pay interest on the loan. The amount of money that we deposit or borrow, the initial starting amount really is called the principal, the starting amount that we borrow or deposit. And the amount of interest depends on the principal, the interest rate, and the time that the money is loaned or deposited. Simple interest is the most basic kind and involves interest calculated only on the principal. So we're only going to figure out a percent of the starting investment or starting loan and multiply that by the time if we have, or the number of years if we have more than 1 year. So to calculate simple interest, it's just as simple as taking the principal times the rate times the time, and the time is usually in years. Okay, so keep that in mind, time, and most of these future financial formulas, T will represent amount of time in years. So this is very much like what we saw before. Our amount is equal to our percent, which is a rate, times a percent of some amount. So the rate R is expressed as a decimal in calculating simple interest. So this is very much like what we did in 8.1, except for now that we have this element of time. So it says, suppose you deposit $2,000 into a savings account at a hometown bank, which has a rate of 6%. It should say simple interest. Okay, it should say simple interest of 6%. Find the interest at the end of the first year. Well, that's just 6% of 2,000. So 6% times 2,000, there's just 1 year, so multiplying by 1 doesn't change anything. You get $120 interest. So the future value after 1 year would be 2,000 plus the 120, which they don't show, but that's what you'd have to the first year. After the second year, you would still have, you get another 120 in interest because simple interest always does 6% of what you initially invested in. So after the end of 1 year, it would be, you'd have 2,120. At the end of 2 years, you'd have 2,240. At the end of 3 years, you'd have 2,360. At the end of 4 years, you'd have 2,480, and so on. So each year, you're adding $120. This one says, let's say you loaned $1,800 for 2 years at a rate of 8% to purchase a used car. Find the interest on the loan. So this is 2 years, simple interest, 8%. So we're taking the loan amount times 8% times 2 years, and over those 2 years, you have to pay $288. So your total cost would actually be $1,800 plus 288 for $2,088. We have a future value formula, but it's actually, I don't really like this formula for simple interest because really you just figure out the interest and multiply it by the time and add it on, very much like tax. So, but P represents the principal again, present value. This is an example where they give a time that's not in years, but it's in months. So this is kind of an interesting example where you have 3 months, you have a loan, 6.5% simple interest, 3 months. Well, what would the time be if it's 3 months in years? Well, 3 months divided by 12. 3 months divided by 12 is 1/4 because there's 12 months in a year. So time would represent 0.25. So you could do this. You could just figure out the interest. Interest equals P times R times T, and then add it on. That's what this formula will do for you in one short step. So really if you do the interest by itself, 1060 times 0.065 times 0.25, you'll get $17.23. If you add that on, you get 1077.23. So this formula will do that in one step. We're not going to spend a ton of time on simple interest through the rest of the course, but this section is good because it introduces what interest is, what the principal is, and how we calculate interest by doing the principal times the rate. After this, we'll look at compound interest, which is far more applicable in the real world, and that's where we're headed next. We'll see you soon.